This section I'm showing you cuts through just over a half of the uterus. It's not the greatest section in terms of preservation, and there is a bit of tissue shrinkage which distorts some of the histology. But nevertheless, I think it's also quite useful just to point out the basic fundamental histological characteristics of the uterus. First, have a look at the limits of the myometrium and the endometrium. The perimetrium is a little bit scrappy and it's on the outside. The myometrium is composed of bundles of smooth muscle cells separated by seams of connective tissue. Even at this low magnification, you can even see small profiles of many uterine arteries that run in the middle part of this muscle layer. The endometrium is a mucosa, although the epithelium is missing over much of the surface, again, as I mentioned earlier, due to the harsh treatment when the organ was collected and processed for histological examination. The boundary of the endometrium with the myometrium is quite obvious, but at this early stage in the menstrual cycle, it's very difficult to draw the line between the endometrium's basal layer and the functional layer. The best indicator is the orientation of the glands. Those in the functional layer are running to the surface, and therefore in this section they're cut longitudinally. The segments of the glands in the basal layer are convoluted, and so they're sectioned in various orientations. Here the glands are narrow because they're not yet active. Their epithelium is tall, rather orderly, and columnar. Look carefully and note there are remnants of the epithelium along the endometrial surface. It's similar to the epitheliums of the glands. This is not surprising because the surface epithelium does come from the glands. After the functional layer of the endometrium is shed during menstruation, the surface is bare connective tissue. The ends of the glands remain at the base of the endometrium in the basal layer. Their cells then divide rapidly and migrate out of the glands and over the surface of the endometrium. So you can see a continuity of two epithelia and can imagine the sheets of cells being pushed out of the glands. I'll show you this happening in the next section. The follicular phase of the endometrium can also be called the proliferative or the estrogenic phase. This section represents an early stage in the menstrual cycle. Once again, view the myometrium, comprised of bundles of smooth muscle cells separated by seams of connective tissue, and again, see profiles of many uterine arteries. The endometrium is very shallow. You can see that the basal part is more cellular than farther up in the boundary, but it's not sharp. Also, the glands twist in various directions in the basal part, but run straight towards the surface higher up. In this section, the surface epithelium is absent because it was lost during menstruation. But, as mentioned in the previous image, the epithelium of these basal glands will proliferate and replace the lost epithelial surface. You can actually see this happening in these small areas here, and again imagine these epithelial cells migrating from these two glands in these two regions. This section demonstrates the uterine endometrium in the middle of the secretory or progesterone phase. Notice its lacy appearance due to the development of the glands. These glands are actively secreting mucus and much of it remains inside the glands, enlarging them. The glands are very tortuous rather than generally straight as you saw previously.